Hello, and welcome to the Castle Talk podcast, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. Tonight, Aaron Michael Ritchey is the author of the Juniper Wars series about life in the year 2058, post a toxic, post-apocalyptic event in the territories of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming, and Montana. In other words, the cool states where we get snow and do fun things. He lives in Colorado with what he calls his cactus flower of a wife and his two stormy daughters. Hello, welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Jason, for having me on. Excited to be here.
I'm so excited. The really weird thing is I feel like talking to you like I'm talking to a mirror, because I also live in Colorado with a wife who I wouldn't necessarily characterize as a cactus flower, but I do have, because she's listening, and I just don't know if that's something she'd embrace. I have to run all metaphors past her before I get to deploy them. But I do have the stormy daughters, two of them. How old are your daughters?
14 and 11, but they're actually ancient goddesses of chaos. So they're actually timeless. It's
14
like
and
Kali,
11.
the creator destructor. Almost 12, but she's like going on like 5 million years old. Yeah.
So that would be a sixth grader and a freshman, probably, if I had to guess.
Eighth grade.
Eighth grade. Okay.
Eighth grade.
So mine are all also, actually, for what it's worth, 14 and 11. And I'm dealing with a
Jason, have you ever seen us in the same room together? Oh my God. Dude, I'm having a Fight Club moment.
Yeah, no, I often wonder. Well, so that's really awesome. It's very strange to run into a fellow Coloradoan with exactly the same life as I have. So, are your girls aware of the writing that you do, and does it impress them?
That's a.
I use
yes
impress sarcastically.
No, the oldest one actually, the beta reader for the series.
Yeah.
And she's like, Dad, when do you become rich and famous so I can like fangirl out with all my friends and you can have like your own HBO show and have like fandom and people dress up as Ren Weller at Comic Cons.
See, that's wonderful. She's like your agent.
It's gonna happen. Yeah, she's very blunt, and we talk about so she's good. My youngest daughter she's a tougher audience. She
Right.
did like one of my books, but she's kind of younger, and the Elizabeth Midnight, she really liked. But that's kind of that kind of spans middle grade to YA.
I see.
But yeah, so my youngest daughter is unimpressed. My oldest daughter, dude. But if my oldest daughter doesn't like a book, like she did not like my first book. She's
Really?
like, yeah, I'm not going to read that. And I was thinking about doing a sequel, and she's like, why are you going to write a sequel to that book? Oh my God. I'm like, okay, then I won't. I'm sorry.
But in this book, the new one, the one that came out just in this past month or so, Killdeer Wins, it actually features a group of sisters, the Weller sisters. So, I mean, tell me like how. So I know that this doesn't seem like the prime thing to talk about since we're talking about a post-apocalypse, but I want to know about this sister thing. Did you use your own daughters as sort of a template for developing the sister characters who are in the lead here?
So the sisters, they originally start out as brothers. So the story about the Juniper Wars, the first book is Dandelion Iron. The second book is Killdeer Winds. It just came out. The third book should be out in March of 2017, called Sissel Inferno. It's going to be a 6-book series through Wordfire Press, Kevin Janner's Wordfire Press. And so the start of the book is I was biking. And so I really like Colorado's a great place to bike. And so I was on my bike, and I was listening to 16 Horsepower. And I can't recommend 60. It's Gothic country. And David Eugene Edwards grew up as the grandson of an itinerant preacher in eastern Colorado. So he loves Jesus but hates Jesus but needs Jesus. It is so dark and so creepy, and it is just brilliant music. So I'm listening to 16 Horsepower, and I'm like, man, I'd love to do like a weird Western. But I was like, I don't want to go like full on weird Western. I want to do like Gunslinger, like Dark Tower.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about, I grew up watching Kung Fu movies, and some of the Kung Fu movies, there's like two brothers in a monastery, and one becomes good and one becomes bad, and then they have to use their Kung Fu to fight each other. And I'm like, man, I want to do like a brother thing.
Yeah.
And then I read somewhere like 75% of all books have male characters. And I'm like, I'll just make them girls.
That's great. That's great.
So then I was like, okay, so I have these three sisters who hate each other but love each other but want to be like each other. And one is this, the middle sister is this alcoholic gunslinger who's just broken. And then, the oldest sister has that whole oldest sister thing where she has to be the responsible one. But and then the youngest one is this kind of genius engineer. And so I really like the family dynamic, and I really like that whole and the whole thing. And so then I was like, okay, steampunk was kind of on the rise, so I wanted to throw in some steampunk elements. But really, I didn't. And I was like, well, should I put it on another planet? And I was like, well, I didn't want to go full sci-fi because, again, I love the Dark Tower. Stephen King's The Dark Tower. I love how
it's
in
our
the opening
world.
book, it's our world, but like it's not, right? I mean, apocalyptic landscape and Roland, the gunslinger, goes into this.
Well, it's moved on. It's our world that has moved into a different phase.
On.
Yeah, precisely.
But I love that scene where Roland goes into the bar and he hears Hey Jude playing. And there's that, oh my God, it's our world, but it's not our world. So I want to do the same thing with the Juniper.
This post-apocalyptic universe in the Juniper Wars, first of all, why is it called the Juniper Wars, and what the hell happened so that basically Colorado is a wasteland?
So I wanted to have that steampunk, and I wanted to have that. So I had to get rid of electricity. And so I was talking to a buddy, and he's like, dude, you should have China nuke Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And I was like talking with a another beta reader who I met at a writers conference, who is he has a PhD in astrophysics and geology and works for the oil industry. As a consultant. And I was like, dude, I need to knock out electricity in 5 Western states using Yellowstone. And he's like, oh, you know what you could do? You could use a flood basalt. And so we kind of came up with this idea that so basically the iron in the soil in Yellowstone is ionized. It's a flood basalt can last for 1 million years. The last one was in India, and so that's what we did to knock out electricity. So electricity doesn't work as well as I wanted to capture. Man, when I was in high school, it felt like there was like all boys and no girls. But then I went to an all boys school, so that's interesting. So there was all boys and no girls. Wow, I'm learning a lot about myself, Jason. But I wanted to capture that feeling
because it was that way. Yes,
it seems that way because it was that way. And so I wanted to get rid of most of the boys. And so in my world, not only are the 5 Western states, electricity doesn't work and they've kind of gone back 200 years, while the rest of the world, talking about moving on, has advanced technology and is kind of this utopian, but then you come to the border of the Juniper. And so it's called the Juniper because they couldn't call it the Ponderosa because we don't have that many trees. But we do have a lot of scrubby juniper.
We do indeed. Yeah. But why, what I don't understand is, I get why somebody would live in Massachusetts and have tablet computers in this world, and go off to school. I get all that. I don't understand why somebody would live in the Juniper in this world that has been plunged back into the 19th century. What would cause that?
That's an excellent question, Jason. Well, Americans, we're kind of a contrary people. One of the things that happens, there was this horrible war with China, and so there was a kind of a revival of this ultra-conservative religiosity out in the U.S. And we have that in us. De Tocqueville saw it in 1848.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are kind of fleeing that ultra-conservative society, which is kind of like the like a Victorian, just a really closed-minded. So some people are fleeing that. Some people are just contrary. Some people don't. There was identification laws passed in the U.S., and so a lot of people are like bristling against that. And so you would have a certain amount of people who would want to live in the Juniper just so they could enjoy kind of an anonymity and also kind of a basic freedom. Yeah, it's violent, and it's horrible, and it's awful. But people, and especially if you grow up in a place,
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah, I mean, and you might it's kind of a reflection of what we have now. You might choose to live in, way, like 80 miles west of Tulsa, in the middle of nothing. And but if that's home, and if you can get whatever it is that you need. And then somebody say, man, why don't you move to Dallas? And like, well, why don't you move to Dallas? I'm perfectly happy here.
That's a great example. Yeah, that's a great example.
this thing that's happened because of the basalt that's caused this dearth of male children. Is that across the entire country or just in the Juniper?
No, in the world,
In the
and
world.
that's one of the big story questions is the sterility epidemic. So like I was saying, I wanted to capture that kind of like, oh my God, I'm never going to find a date. And then
Yeah.
Kavatika Weller, she's the youngest sister. She's like, there's 90% of the population is female,
Yeah.
and so there's only 10% left of boys,
And yet they're
and
homophobic.
her,
They're
and yet
you,
they're exactly,
yeah. It's
exactly.
fascinating. There's this point where
I
she sees these two women holding hands, and she has reticence about it because she has listened to, she's been receiving sermons about gay relationships for as long as she can remember, and so she's suspicious of that. I just thought that was fascinating. I have to tell you right off that I really like the voice that the book is written in, the conversational style. It's very approachable. It has a lot of complicated ideas, and yet it doesn't feel, if this makes sense, it feels very Stephen Kingy in that it doesn't feel like reading. It feels like just absorbing a story, like and which I would hope is the goal. It's pretty wonderful that way. Uh
Thanks, Jason.
oh,
Dude,
sure. No,
compare me to Stephen King.
the
I'm
the,
fanning
the
myself. I don't know what to say.
this flower is going to
Uh,
wilt. Yes. No, but my point is Stephen King, I think, perfected this talent for what I would call invisible writing,
yeah,
where you pick it up and you just go whoomp, and you turn a page and you don't even realize you're reading anymore. And I think and some writers really have no desire to do that. They want you to admire their sentences, and per, others craft their sentences so that the sentences become invisible and all the scaffolding moves away. And I feel like this is writing that you don't even notice it happens. You just like go, it's very page turning, which is kind of what you want. And you got so many great
yeah,
reviews on Amazon that say the same thing. People keep going, oh, I couldn't put this down. I'm really addicted to what's going to happen next to these sisters. So that's going well. Okay, tell me about the psycho. What's she called? The Psycho Princess?
the Psycho Princesses. Well, so so I grew up in the Cold War, and I loved you know nuclear wastelands and post-apocalyptic and Mad Max, and so I knew there was going to be, and I really liked. I studied Chinese history, and so this idea of warlords always kind of fascinated me. How society breaks down, and so kind of whoever is kind of the most violent kind of takes over. And so when I was pondering the Juniper and kind of peopling it with all of the different people, I was like, what about like the crazy like psycho princesses, which you meet them in book two, and I won't give anything away because it's yeah, there's a story there. But anyway, so yeah, so they're kind of my Mad Max kind of crazy, and there's a reason. I mean, I pose all these story questions, and then throughout the series, I'm kind of answering them as I go. Why did China nuke Yellowstone? What was the cause of the sterility epidemic?
Hmm.
Um, why is the psycho princess so psycho? That kind of a thing.
Can you describe the Psycho Princess for me?
Well, I wanted to kind of make
Oh,
them
is that?
like so.
Are you thinking of that as a spoiler for book two? You don't wanna give it.
No,
Okay.
no, no,
All
no.
right.
I can. Basically, when I was coming up with them, I was like, okay, they have this idea, and actually, this is. I was talking with some lesbian friends of mine and some gender queer friends, and they were
Mhm.
saying that there's kind of this whole idea of XY and XX procreation is
Yeah.
not necessarily the only way, and they've
Right.
actually been able to take eggs from two different women and get a embryo. And
You're talking
so
about
the Psycho
ovarian
Princesses,
splicing, right? I think the
yeah.
yeah. Go ahead. Continue.
So the Psycho Princess want to kill all of the boys because boys are, because testosterone is a disease, and so they are kind of like ultra female, and so yeah. And so they kind of, and so I just had this vision of like women on prom dresses and like costume jewelry with machine guns,
That sounds
just
great.
writing down, yeah,
That's
just,
fabulous.
yeah,
So
I
is
love
that what you
that.
do when you're doing a steampunk? And by the way, I don't come from complete unknowing about this. I did do a steampunk series, but it was in manga. But it was a similar thing. It was like, okay, we know what the storyline is, but what are the different adventures along the way? And one thing you do is come up with different groups for your characters to run into. So, okay, so you've got the evil prom dress girls. What other groups are they running into in this in the Juniper Wars?
Now we're getting into spoiler. Well, there's Junmei Angel, which is the warlord that's really kind of taking over Colorado. And
Okay.
so, book one is they're fighting their way through Junmei Angel, and again, there's a reason why there's a purpose for her, and she comes back in book four. But they also run into the kind of this mysterious army, and the story really centers around a boy they find who on their because it's a post-apocalyptic cattle drive. So these three sisters have to save the ranch by taking their cattle from Burlington, Colorado, to
Yeah.
Wendover, Nevada. And they come across this boy, and the oldest sister doesn't want anything to do with the boy because the boy is dangerous. The middle gunslinging sister wants to sell the boy because then they wouldn't have to do the cattle drive. And the
Sure.
youngest sister falls in love with him. But
Of
little
course.
do they know that he has the fate of the world in his hands, and there's an inhuman army that will stop at nothing to find him. Dun, dun, dun. God, I love this. I love this, man. I love this series. And when I was writing it, I was like, I wanted to write it in first person. And the voice of Kavatika Weller just like it was the easiest book to write. A lot of edits, but it was the easiest book to write. I'd write it in big, huge 10,000 word chunks. It was great.
I was going to ask, like, what your process is. Do you write several sessions a week, every day? What's your way?
No, I'm every day. I get up early. I get my writing done.
Are you serious? You get up.
Yeah.
So, what time are we talking about?
5-ish, 5:30.
And so you try and knock out like an hour before you have to get ready for taking people to junior
I work
high.
from home. I have a good gig. My day job is a good gig. I get to work from home, so
Oh, good for you.
the commute and I don't have to bathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that
Shower,
saves
that's
valuable time.
2006. So I generally get up. I bike to a coffee shop. I've been writing at Taco Bell because no one's there. Because Taco Bell breakfast is, I don't want to cast aspersions, but anyway, and no one's there, so I have a little breakfast bowl. I write for a couple hours and then come home. But I'm a daily writer type of guy.
That's
With the
fabulous.
Juniper Wars, though, I would find myself just like not being able to step away. That I would just write it.
So what are you working on? What are you working on now?
The sixth book. I'm working on edits on the fourth. I turned in edits to my editor on for the third book, but I'm getting the fourth book ready for beta readers, and then I'm working on book six. So.
Outstanding. Okay, well that's wonderful. And so the second one just came out in September. So how quick? The sixth book, are these coming out like 2 a year, or what are you aiming for right now?
That's the goal, 2 a year. With the Juniper Wars, I've asked a lot of writers I know to write stories in the world of the Juniper Wars. And
Really?
So Eitan Collin, who wrote The Incorporated Man with his brother, he wrote one of the stories. I have authors, Mario Acevedo, his one, he wrote the Felix Gomez
I know Mario.
detective
Yeah.
series. Mario, his story is just crazy. It's just
He has the best. He has the best titles, honestly. Like go ahead. Continue.
And so on my website, I have a free novella that takes place in the world, and I also have stories from all these different authors. And then I also have another story that just came out in an anthology called Dragon Riders, which is a Wordfire Press anthology that I'm in with Brandon Sanderson. And my story in there is really about the ecstasy and drudgery of the writer's life.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. That would be perfect. All right. Well, you'll have to send that to me. Actually, what's the name of that of the collection?
It's called Dragon Writers. So
Dragon Riders. All right. Writers. Like F. Scott Fitzgerald. Writers. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So it's kind of combining the fire of the idea of the dragon and then also the creative process of writers.
Got it. That sounds pretty awesome. And by the way, I just found a list of Mario Acevedo's titles because nothing came to mind when I said it earlier. I just blanked on it. But here it says, I see The Nymphos of Rocky Flats, The Undead Kama Sutra, Jailbait Zombie. What a great title. Yeah. And for all that,
SmackDown.
he's such a nice and gentle man, and he's writing these actually pretty wonderful books with crazily sleaze-tastic titles. So, Aaron, thank you so much for being on, and I hope people check out the Juniper Wars, which is in its second book now, so you can read 2 right now, and there's 4 more to come very soon. Thanks a lot.
And stories and novellas and everything else.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jason.